Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today. I bring you a powerful and deeply loving story asterisk, Victoria. Hay smoothed down the silk fabric of her emerald dress as she stepped through the crystal doors of Le Jardin, the most elegant dining establishment in the heart of downtown. The soft glow of chandeliers cast warm shadows across white tablecloths, and the gentle murmur of conversation mixed with the tinkling of wine glasses created a symphony of sophistication. It was exactly the kind of place where people celebrated milestones, where couples whispered promises, where families gathered to mark special occasions. For Victoria, it was the place where she would spend her 30th birthday completely alone. The hostess, a young woman with kind eyes and a professional smile, glanced at the reservation book. "Good evening, Miss Hayes. Table for one, correct?" Victoria nodded, forcing brightness into her voice. "Yes, just me tonight." The walk to her table felt longer than it should have. Past couples leaning close over candlelight, past groups of friends clinking champagne flutes, past a family singing happy birthday to a child who squealed with delight. Victoria kept her chin up, her shoulders back, refusing to let anyone see the weight pressing against her chest. Her table sat beside a floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city streets below. Rain had begun to fall, turning the evening lights into blurred streaks of gold and red against the dark pavement. Victoria settled into her chair and accepted the menu from the server, a middle-aged man with gentle hands and a warm smile. "May I start you with something to drink, miss?" "A glass of red wine, please." "The house selection is fine," as he walked away. Victoria pulled her phone from her small clutch and scrolled through the messages that had accumulated throughout the day. Her sister Emma had sent a rushed text that morning with birthday wishes and an apology for not being able to make dinner because her son had fallen ill. Her best friend Rachel was traveling for work and had promised to celebrate when she returned next week. Her father had called earlier, his voice distant and formal as always, wishing her well before quickly ending the conversation to return to his business meetings. Everyone had reasons. Everyone had lives. And Victoria understood, truly she did. But understanding did not make the empty chair across from her any less noticeable. The server returned with her wine, and Victoria ordered the seared salmon with roasted vegetables without really looking at the menu. Food was just fuel tonight, something to occupy her hands and give her a reason to be here rather than in her empty apartment. She sipped the wine slowly, watching the rain slide down the window. Somewhere in the restaurant, a woman laughed, the sound bright and carefree. Victoria wondered what it felt like to be that unburdened, to move through the world without constant awareness of being alone in a sea of togetherness. The stranger's arrival, she did not notice him at first. Her attention was fixed on the street below, where a couple hurried past under a shared umbrella, their shoulders pressed together against the cold. But then a shadow fell across her table, and a voice deep and warm like aged whiskey spoke words that would redirect the entire course of her evening. "Forgive the intrusion, but I believe I'm your birthday gift." Victoria's head snapped up. Standing beside her table was a man who seemed to have stepped out of a classic film. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that emphasized broad shoulders and a lean frame. His dark hair was swept back from a face that balanced rugged angles with refined features. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as storm clouds, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm sorry. What?" Victoria managed, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wineglass. The man smiled, a slow curve of his lips that held both confidence and something else, something almost vulnerable. "My name is Daniel Cross, and I know this is unconventional, but I've been sitting across the room for the past 20 minutes trying to convince myself not to come over here. I failed. You think you're my birthday gift?" Victoria raised an eyebrow, unsure whether to be amused or alarmed. "I heard the server mention it when he brought your wine," Daniel explained, gesturing toward the empty chair. "And I thought no one should celebrate a birthday alone. May I sit?" Every reasonable instinct told Victoria to politely decline. He was a stranger. This was bizarre. She should send him away and finish her dinner in peace. Instead, she found herself nodding. Daniel settled into the chair with an easy grace. And immediately, the dynamic of the evening shifted. The The table no longer felt like an island of solitude, but a space of possibility. The server returned, did a double take at the addition to the table, but smoothly adapted by bringing another menu and taking Daniel's drink order. "So," Victoria said, studying him with open curiosity, "do you make a habit of approaching women dining alone?" "Never," Daniel replied without hesitation. "This is completely out of character for me. But something about seeing you here tonight. I couldn't just walk away. It's either very romantic or slightly concerning." "I'm hoping for romantic, but I understand if it lands on concerning." His smile widened, and Victoria felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Tell me about yourself, Victoria Hayes." She blinked. "How do you know my full name?" "The hostess said it when you checked in. I have good hearing." He leaned forward slightly, his forearms resting on the table. "And before you ask, no, I'm not a stalker. Yes, I realize this entire situation is strange. And yes, I will leave the moment you ask me to. But I'm hoping you won't ask." Victoria should have felt threatened, but strangely, she didn't. There was something in the openness of his expression. The way he met her gaze directly without trying to dominate the conversation. That put her at ease. "I'm an architect," she heard herself saying. "I design commercial spaces, mostly office buildings and retail centers. I live in the Riverside district. I have one sister, a complicated relationship with my father, and a best friend who's currently in Singapore for work." "And you're spending your birthday alone?" Daniel added gently. "Life gets busy. People have obligations. It's true, but that doesn't make it easier." The server arrived with Daniel's whiskey and took their dinner orders. Victoria noticed that Daniel ordered with consideration, asking questions about the preparation and clearly familiar with fine dining. He was not trying to impress her with flashy choices, but making genuine decisions. A conversation that flows as their meals arrived. The conversation began to flow with surprising ease. Daniel revealed he worked in international finance, specializing in mergers and acquisitions, which explained the expensive suit and the air of someone comfortable in high-stakes situations. He had traveled extensively, living for years in London, Tokyo, and New York before recently settling back in their city. "Why come back?" Victoria asked, cutting into her salmon. Daniel paused, his fork hovering over his plate. "I was looking for something I'd lost. Or maybe something I never found in the first place." "That's cryptic." "I'm working on being less mysterious," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Let's say I reached a point where success felt hollow. I had everything I thought I wanted, but none of it mattered. So I came home to figure out what actually does matter." Victoria understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. She had built a successful career, earned respect in her field, purchased a beautiful apartment. Yet here she was, celebrating 3 decades of life alone in a restaurant, wondering if this was all there was. "What about you?" Daniel asked. What matters to Victoria Hayes? No one had asked her that question in years. Victoria set down her fork, considering her answer carefully. "I used to think it was achievement, proving I could succeed on my own terms. But lately I've been wondering if I built such high walls around myself that I forgot to leave a door." "Walls keep things out," Daniel observed quietly, "but they also keep things in." Their eyes met across the table, and Victoria felt something shift, a recognition of shared loneliness. Of two people who had spent so long protecting themselves that they had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen. The dinner stretched on, course after course, conversation flowing from light topics to deeper ones. Daniel made her laugh with stories of cultural misunderstandings during his time abroad. Victoria found herself sharing dreams she had buried, like her desire to design a community center that would bring people together rather than just house businesses. The promise of tomorrow when the server brought the dessert menu. Daniel ordered a chocolate torte with 2 forks, and when it arrived with a single candle flickering in the center, Victoria felt tears prick unexpectedly at her eyes. "Make a wish," Daniel said softly. Victoria closed her eyes, and for the first time in years, she wished not for professional success or personal achievements, but for connection, for the courage to let someone in, for the possibility that this strange, Magical evening might be the beginning of something real. She blew out the candle, and when she opened her eyes, Daniel was watching her with an expression that made her heart race. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "This was the best birthday gift I could have received." "The evening doesn't have to end here," Daniel said, his voice low and earnest. "I'd like to see you again, Victoria, if you'll let me." She should have been cautious. She should have asked for time to think, to process this whirlwind encounter. But something in her chest, something that had been locked away for far too long, urged her forward. "I'd like that too." Daniel smiled, a genuine expression of relief and joy, and reached across the table. Victoria placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm, the strength of his fingers, as they curled gently around hers. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets clean. Inside Le Jardin, as Victoria Hayes sat across from Daniel Cross, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt hope. And as they exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again, neither of them could have known that this chance encounter was not chance at all, but the fulfillment of a promise made long ago by someone who had loved Victoria enough to ensure she would never truly be alone. The first chapter of their story had begun, written in candlelight and whispered over wine, and the pages ahead held secrets, revelations, and a love that would transform them both. The morning after her birthday, Victoria woke with the strange sensation that the previous evening had been a dream. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom curtains, casting golden patterns across the white sheets, and for a moment she lay still, replaying every detail. The restaurant, the rain, the mysterious man who had appeared at her table, claiming to be her gift. It seemed too cinematic to be real. Then her phone buzzed on the nightstand, and reality confirmed itself. "Good morning, Victoria. I hope you slept well. Would you like to have coffee this afternoon?" Daniel. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. Part of her wanted to decline, to retreat back into the safe predictability of her solitary life. But a stronger part, the part that had made a wish over a flickering candle, urged her forward. "I'd love to. There's a cafe near the Botanical Gardens. 2:00. His response came within seconds. "Perfect. I'll see you there." Victoria spent the morning in a state of nervous anticipation, changing her outfit 3 times before settling on dark jeans and a soft cream sweater. She arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and ordered a cappuccino. Choosing a table by the window where she could watch the entrance, Daniel arrived exactly on time. Dressed casually in a navy sweater and gray slacks, his dark hair slightly tousled by the breeze. When he spotted her through the glass, his face lit up with a smile that sent warmth cascading through her chest. "Came," he said as he approached the table, as if he had genuinely worried she might not. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might wake up and decide last night was too strange to repeat." He signaled the server and ordered a black coffee before turning his full attention back to her. "I'm glad you gave me a second chance." The afternoon unfolded with the same easy connection they had discovered the night before. They talked about everything and nothing, childhood memories and travel experiences, favorite books and films they had watched too many times. Daniel had a way of listening that made Victoria feel heard, not just acknowledged, but truly understood. "Tell me about your family," Daniel asked, as they ordered a second round of drinks. Victoria hesitated. Family was complicated territory, filled with old wounds and careful distance. "My mother passed away when I was 16, cancer. My father threw himself into work afterward and never really came back. My sister Emma is wonderful, but she has her own family now. We're close, but in that way where you care deeply, but don't see each other enough." "I'm sorry about your mother," Daniel said quietly, something shifting in his expression. "That must have been incredibly difficult. It was the defining event of my adolescence. Everything became before and after that moment." Victoria wrapped her hands around her warm cup. "She was the heart of our family. When she died, we all just drifted into our separate orbits." Daniel was silent for a moment, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "What was her name?" "Catherine. Catherine Hayes." Victoria smiled softly. "She was an artist, a painter. Our house was always filled with color and music and laughter. She had this incredible ability to make everyone feel special, like you were the most important person in her world. She sounds remarkable. She was. Victoria's voice caught slightly. I miss her every day. The pattern emerges over the following weeks. Victoria and Daniel fell into a rhythm. Coffee dates became dinner dates, which became long walks through the city and evenings spent at art galleries and concerts. Daniel seemed to know exactly the kinds of things Victoria loved, often surprising her with tickets to exhibitions she had mentioned in passing or reservations at restaurants she had always wanted to try. It should have felt romantic, this attentiveness, and it did. But something else began to emerge, a pattern that Victoria could not quite name, but felt increasingly in her awareness. Daniel knew things he shouldn't know. Small things. Insignificant details that could be explained away individually, but accumulated into something that felt deliberate. He knew she took her coffee with a specific ratio of milk to espresso before she told him. He knew she had a scar on her left knee from falling off a bicycle as a child, though she wore jeans every time they met. He knew her favorite painting at the City Museum was a landscape by an obscure artist she had never mentioned at first. Victoria dismissed these instances as coincidence or good guesses, but as they multiplied, a seed of unease took root. One evening, as they sat in Daniel's apartment, sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, Victoria noticed a photograph on a shelf. It showed Daniel, perhaps 10 years younger, standing beside a woman with warm brown eyes and a brilliant smile. The woman wore a paint-stained apron and held a brush in one hand. Victoria's blood turned cold. "Daniel," she said slowly, picking up the frame with trembling hands. "Who is this?" He turned from the kitchen where he had been opening a bottle of wine, and his expression shifted when he saw what she held. Not surprise, but resignation, as if he had been waiting for this moment. "That's Catherine," he said quietly. "Your mother." The frame slipped from Victoria's fingers, clattering against the hardwood floor. "What?" Daniel set down the wine bottle and crossed the room, his movements careful, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I think we need to talk. Please, sit down." "I don't want to sit down." Victoria's voice rose, panic and confusion warring in her chest. "I want you to explain why you have a photograph of my dead mother in your apartment. I want you to explain how you knew her. I want you to explain what the hell is going on. Victoria, please." Daniel's voice remained calm, but she could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "I'll tell you everything, but I need you to listen. All of it." She wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to leave this apartment, to block his number, to retreat back into her safe, solitary world. But the photograph on the floor, her mother's smiling face looking up at her, kept her frozen in place. "Talk," she whispered. The truth revealed, Daniel moved to the sofa and sat down, his hands clasped between his knees. After a moment, Victoria lowered herself into the chair across from him, needing the distance. "I met your mother 20 years ago," Daniel began, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. "I was 19, working part-time at an art supply store while attending university. Catherine came in regularly to buy paints and canvases. She was kind to me, treated me like a person rather than just a clerk. When she found out I was studying finance but loved art, she took an interest. Started inviting me to gallery openings, introducing me to other artists, encouraging me to maintain balance in my life between practicality and passion." Victoria listened, her heart pounding, trying to reconcile this story with the mother she remembered. "We became friends," Daniel continued. "Close friends? She became like a second mother to me at a time when I desperately needed guidance. My own family was fractured, my father was absent, my mother was overwhelmed. Catherine filled that void. She taught me to see beauty in ordinary things, to value relationships over achievements, to believe I was worthy of love." "Why didn't I ever meet you?" Victoria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You did once. You were 14, and I was visiting your home. We spoke for maybe 5 minutes before you went to meet friends. You probably don't remember." Victoria searched her memory but found nothing. 14 was 2 years before her mother's diagnosis, when life still felt infinite and safe. "When Catherine got sick," Daniel said, and his voice finally cracked, "I visited her in the hospital as often as I could. Those last months, we talked about many things. About life, about regrets, about the people she would leave behind. She worried most about you, Victoria. About how you would navigate the world without her guidance. About how your father would withdraw and you would learn to build walls to protect yourself from further pain. Tears were streaming down Victoria's face now, silent and hot. She talked about me? Constantly. You were her pride and joy. And in those final weeks, she made me promise something. Daniel leaned forward, his gray eyes glistening. She made me promise that when you turned 30, I would find you. She said 30 was when she had finally figured out who she was, what she wanted, what mattered. She wanted to give you the gift of connection, of someone who would see you the way she saw you, someone who would care enough to break through those walls. So this, Victoria gestured between them, her voice breaking. All of this was just you keeping a promise. You didn't really want to meet me. You were just fulfilling an obligation to my dead mother? No. Daniel stood abruptly, crossing the space between them and kneeling before her chair. Victoria, listen to me. Yes, I came to that restaurant because of a promise. Yes, I had been watching from a distance, learning about you, waiting for the right moment. But the moment I sat down at your table, the moment you smiled at me despite thinking I was insane, everything changed. The woman I've gotten to know these past weeks is extraordinary. You're brilliant and funny and brave and guarded and vulnerable and real. What started as a promise became something I never expected. She whispered, I fell in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, fragile and profound. Victoria looked into Daniel's face, searching for deception, for manipulation, for any sign that this was part of some elaborate game. But all she saw was raw honesty, a man laying himself bare before her. I don't know what to believe, she said finally. I don't know what's real. I understand. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away for not telling you sooner. But everything I've felt, everything we've shared that's real, your mother gave me the chance to find you, but you gave me the reason to stay. Victoria closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the torrent of emotions. Betrayal and understanding, anger and gratitude, fear and something that felt dangerously close to love, all crashed together inside her. I need time, she said, standing and moving toward the door. I need to think about all of this. Daniel didn't try to stop her. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready. If you're ever ready. Victoria left the apartment and walked into the cold night air. Her mother's face from that photograph burned into her memory, and Daniel's words echoing in her mind. The truth had shattered the beautiful story she had been living, but somewhere beneath the pain, a small voice whispered that perhaps the truth was even more beautiful than the fantasy. She just needed to find the courage to believe it. For 2 weeks, Victoria avoided Daniel's calls and messages. She went through the motions of her daily life, designing floor plans and attending meetings. But her mind remained stuck in that moment of revelation. The photograph of her mother smiling beside a younger Daniel played on repeat in her thoughts, accompanied by questions that had no easy answers. Had she been manipulated? Or had fate, working through her mother's love, brought them together? Was their connection genuine? Or had she fallen for an elaborate performance designed to fulfill a deathbed promise? Victoria wanted to be angry. Part of her was angry at Daniel for the deception, at her mother for orchestrating this from beyond the grave, at herself for being foolish enough to believe in fairy tales. But anger required certainty, and all she felt was confusion. On a gray Saturday morning, Victoria found herself standing outside her sister Emma's house, a charming 2-story colonial with toys scattered across the front lawn. She had not told Emma about Daniel, had kept that part of her life private. But now she needed perspective. Emma answered the door with her youngest son balanced on her hip, her hair pulled into a messy bun and flour dusting her sweater. Victoria, I wasn't expecting you. Come in, come in. I'm attempting to bake cookies with the kids, which means the kitchen looks like a disaster zone. Inside, the house radiated warmth and chaos. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator, family photographs lined the hallway, and the smell of vanilla and burnt sugar filled the air. Emma settled her son in a playpen and poured 2 cups of coffee, then turned her full attention to her sister. "Something's wrong," she said immediately. "Talk to me." Victoria told her everything. The birthday dinner, the mysterious stranger, the weeks of connection, the photograph, the promise. As she spoke, Emma's expression shifted from surprise to understanding to something that looked almost like recognition. "Do you remember a young man named Daniel who used to visit Mom?" Emma asked when Victoria finished. "Tall, dark hair, always very polite?" Victoria shook her head. "Daniel said I met him once, but I don't remember. He came to the house several times before Mom got sick, and then he visited her in the hospital near the end. I was 17, and I remember thinking it was strange that this college-age guy was so devoted to our mother. But Mom talked about him fondly. She said he was a lost soul she had taken under her wing." "Did she ever mention making him promise anything?" Emma was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "The day before Mom died, she asked me to step out of the room for a while. Said she needed to have a private conversation with Daniel. When I came back, he was crying and holding her hand, and she looked peaceful. I never knew what they discussed." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "She orchestrated this, Emma. She set me up with a stranger from beyond the grave," or Emma said gently, reaching across the table to take her sister's hand. "She loved you so much that she wanted to ensure you wouldn't spend your life alone." Mom saw things in people, Victoria. She saw potential and connections that others missed. If she trusted Daniel enough to make him promise to find you, maybe you should trust that too. But how do I know his feelings are real? How do I know he's not just playing a role? Have his actions felt like a performance? When you're with him, does it feel false? Victoria thought back to the afternoons in coffee shops, evenings walking through the city, the conversations that flowed effortlessly. She thought about the way Daniel looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the walls she had built. She thought about how safe she felt in his presence, how understood. "No," she whispered. "It feels real." "Then maybe it is. Maybe Mom gave him a reason to find you, but what happened after that was all you too." Love doesn't come with guarantees, Victoria. It requires a leap of faith. The question is whether you're brave enough to jump. To return that evening, Victoria sat in her apartment with her laptop open to a blank document. She had started and deleted a dozen messages to Daniel, unable to find the right words. Finally, she closed the computer and pulled out her phone, scrolling through their text history. There were photos he had sent, a sunset from his office window, a street musician they had stopped to listen to, a dish from a restaurant he thought she would enjoy. Each image was a small piece of the story they had been building together at the bottom of her closet. Victoria found a box she had not opened in years. Inside were her mother's things, items she had saved but could not bear to look at. Sketchbooks filled with watercolor landscapes, tubes of dried paint, a few pieces of jewelry, and a stack of letters tied with ribbon. Victoria untied the ribbon with trembling fingers and began to read. Most were cards from students her mother had taught, thank you notes for her kindness and encouragement. But near the bottom, Victoria found a letter with her own name on the envelope. Written in her mother's graceful script, with her heart in her throat, Victoria opened it. "My dearest Victoria, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have lived without me for some years now. I hope you have grown into the strong, brilliant woman I always knew you would become. I hope you have pursued your dreams and built a life that brings you joy. But I worry, my darling girl, that you have also built walls. That losing me taught you to protect your heart by keeping people at a distance. I know this because I did the same after my own mother died. I spent years afraid to love fully, afraid of the pain that comes with loss. It was not until I met your father and chose to risk everything that I understood the truth. Love is always worth it. The joy outweighs the sorrow. The connection outweighs the fear. If by chance a young man named Daniel finds his way to you, please give him a chance. He is good and kind and carries wounds similar to yours. I believe you could heal each other if you let yourselves. Do not let fear steal your chance at happiness. You deserve to be loved completely, Victoria. You deserve to be seen. Trust my judgment one last time and trust your own heart. It will not lead you astray. All my love, always and forever, Mom." Victoria pressed the letter to her chest and wept. For her mother, for the years of loneliness, for the walls she had built brick by brick, and for the man who had been patient enough to find the door. When the tears subsided, she knew what she had to do. The restaurant Redux Victoria texted Daniel with a simple message. "Meet me at Le Jardin tomorrow night. 8 o'clock. His response was immediate. "I'll be there." She arrived early, requesting the same table by the window where their story had begun. The restaurant looked exactly as it had on her birthday, candlelight flickering across white tablecloths, the soft murmur of conversation creating a cocoon of intimacy. But this time, Victoria was not alone. This time, she was choosing to be there, choosing to take the leap. Daniel arrived wearing the same charcoal suit he had worn that first night, and when his eyes found her across the room, the relief and hope in his expression made her breath catch. He crossed to the table and stood beside the empty chair, waiting for permission. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," Victoria replied. "Will you sit?" He did, and for a moment they simply looked at each other, years of history and weeks of connection hanging between them. "I found a letter," Victoria began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My mother wrote it before she died. She told me about you, about her hope that we would find each other. She said you could heal me, and I could heal you." Daniel's eyes glistened in the candlelight. Catherine was wise. She was right. I have spent 14 years building walls, convincing myself that being alone was safer than risking loss. But these past weeks with you, I felt more alive than I have in years. You see me, Daniel? Not the version of myself I present to the world, but the real me underneath. And that terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. "I see you," Daniel confirmed, reaching across the table, "and I love what I see." Victoria placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth and strength of his grip. "I need you to promise me something. No more secrets. No more hidden agendas. If we do this, if we really try, it has to be honest from here forward. Promise. Complete honesty. Always." "Then I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. I'm choosing to trust my mother's judgment and my own heart." Daniel stood and moved around the table, pulling Victoria to her feet and into his arms. He held her tightly, his face buried in her hair, and she could feel him shaking slightly with emotion. "I promise to spend every day proving that your trust is not misplaced," he whispered against her ear. "I promise to honor your mother's faith in me by loving you the way you deserve to be loved. And I promise that what we build together will be ours, not hers, not the past, but our own story." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other, while the restaurant continued around them. When they finally pulled apart, Daniel reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. "I bought this the day after I met you," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a single diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the tablecloth. "I know it's fast. I know we still have so much to learn about each other. But I also know that I want to spend my life learning. Victoria Hayes, will you marry me?" Victoria looked at the ring, then at Daniel's face, and finally felt the last of her walls crumble. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and they kissed there in the middle of Le Jardin, surrounded by strangers who became witnesses to a love that had been written in the stars, orchestrated by a woman who understood that the greatest gift a mother can give her daughter is the courage to open her heart. Epilogue 1 year later. On Victoria's 31st birthday, she and Daniel returned to Le Jardin for what had become their tradition. But this time, they brought Emma and her family, Daniel's sister, whom Victoria had come to love, and a small group of close friends. The private dining room was filled with laughter and warmth, with toasts and stories. With the kind of connection that Catherine Hayes had always believed was the most important thing in life, at the end of the evening, Victoria stood and raised her glass. "A year ago tonight, a stranger sat at my table and changed my life. But he wasn't really a stranger. He was a gift from my mother, a reminder that love finds us when we least expect it and most need it. To Daniel, for having the courage to keep a promise. To my mother, for knowing what I needed before I did. And to all of you for being part of our story." As everyone clinked glasses, Victoria caught Daniel's eye across the table. He mouthed 3 words, "I love you." She mouthed them back, and in that moment, sitting surrounded by family and friends, Victoria understood what her mother had known all along. The walls we build to protect ourselves often become the prisons that keep us from living. But when we find the courage to tear them down, when we choose connection over safety, we discover that love is not something to be feared, but something to be celebrated. And sometimes, the best gifts come wrapped in mystery, delivered by fate, and blessed by those who love us enough to ensure we never face the world alone. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to click like. Share this story with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more meaningful stories.